I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Mosaic of Wine Series 1. Giving my audience of wine lovers, students and professionals from across the world access to some of the most interesting, successful and influential people working in and around the world of wine. Series episodes explore the guest's backstory, covering their foundations, growth and legacy, using Interpreting Wine's mosaic storytelling model. I would love this episode and this series to be the start of a conversation, so please make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine podcast to be alerted when each series episode goes live. We continue the Mosaic of Wine series today in the company of Milena Berman, co-founder of Hautes-Côtes. We hear Milena's origin story, taking us from California to Burgundy, and we discuss the process of settling in Beaune. We discuss the Kassel Art Fair and its influence on local community, organizing travel experiences for museum donors and trustees, developing wine experience in Burgundy, via self-guided learning and exposure in general, before a deep dive into cultural assimilation in Beaune, learning the language and bridging the world of wine and art, before exploring the offer of Hautes-Côtes, via educational trips for small private groups, van et hip-hop, and bespoke events like Terra. Closing on a discussion of local mutual exchange in experiences as an antidote to extractive tourism. Enjoy!
I am from California originally. I'm from a bicultural family. My mother's from Germany. My father's American from New York, and I moved around quite a bit as a kid. My mother's a professor, so we moved to different college towns, I guess, and spent time in Germany as well. And I moved to Burgundy, so I studied art history and started working in San Francisco after graduating from university. As most art history students end up doing, I worked in restaurants. My colleagues in the restaurants were all, art history majors, English majors, philosophy majors, that kind of thing. And was working in San Francisco, 5 jobs, I think, at the same time, mostly restaurants. So, 3 of them were restaurants. And one was a German kindergarten. And one was, on the weekends, I was working in an art space, so a private collection owned by the Pilara family in San Francisco. And I was giving a guided visit there to a museum group one day, sort of behind the scenes kind of thing. And the group, I asked them a little bit about what they were doing and who had organized their trip. They were on a trip visiting Napa, San Francisco, galleries, artist studios, private collections, things like that. And it had been organized by a company that happened to be based in Burgundy, France. And so I connected with the colleague who was showing people around, and she ended up saying, why don't you write to the owners of this company? They're based in Beaune. And Beaune was, for me at that stage, really an abstract concept. It was somewhere, a name that I had seen on wine lists, but was not somewhere I was familiar with. I had visited Paris, but never Burgundy. And I had a Zoom call with them, and 3 weeks later, I moved to Burgundy.
Quick one for those of you listening who work with producer groups and wine regions. If you're struggling to break through the noise and communicate your unique story, what you might not know is that Interpreting Wine offers best-in-class marketing services to unlock your unique character and tell your story more effectively. In today's competitive wine storytelling landscape, we've developed a transformative 3-phase approach. Tell better stories, increase event engagement, and activate untapped audiences. Transforming how you connect with your target market and driving measurable business results. We've reached full capacity for client projects with no new engagements until 20th of January 2025. Lock in our 2024 prices before they rise in January. Head to interpretingwine.com/2025 prices, where you can read the full blog and join the waitlist before we close. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
So that was 12 years ago now. So I moved here. I didn't know anyone. And I guess so I was working for this company that organized trips for museum donors and trustees all over the world. So they were based in Burgundy for lifestyle reasons only, I guess. We weren't involved with wine. We weren't doing wine trips, but, taking collectors and museum patrons all over, whether, to art fairs, the Frieze, London, New York, going to, I went to Mumbai, to Argentina, to Myanmar, all over the world, really, and was just based here. And didn't know anyone, didn't speak French, but it was a really beautiful place to land, a really nice, quiet town, coming from San Francisco. And I moved here in February. So I remember one day looking out of my window and seeing no one. I was in the main central square is where my first apartment was. And I thought, oh my God, everyone's left and hasn't told me something has happened. It really, if you've ever been to Burgundy in, between, I don't know, April and October, November, it's really can be quite busy with tourists and people visiting wine professionals. But that other part of the year, it's really, really quiet. So a nice quiet place to land. But as a 23-year-old, I guess, was also a bit abrupt in terms of, okay, now I've got to meet some people, learn the language. I through a mutual friend of my father, who's not anywhere near the wine industry, but knew one person who knew one person in Burgundy, and sent me there to the office for lunch and said, why don't you have lunch, contact this woman. She's very nice. She knows a lot of people. And I found myself in this lunch in Becky Wasserman's office here in Beaune, which was, of course, a very nice place to land. The name didn't mean anything to me at the time, but since then means a lot to me and to a lot of people. So Becky was, she's passed away now, but she was a real pioneer in Burgundy and a real connector. She brought a lot of people together, whether it was for lunches in her office, as I was part of, or in her home in Beaune, a mentor to so many people. And so I guess just being in that office and meeting then the other employees who were sort of my age, we exchanged phone numbers and we started then, introduced me to other friends who were at the time all at the wine school in Burgundy, in Beaune, studying to be enologists or winemakers or what have you in Beaune. And so those became friends. And I guess I just sort of started to build my community from there.
Yeah, and it's I think it's, it was such an interesting connection to make because, again, something that you've shared with me and we may well revisit later on is that around you in Beaune, I believe that everyone kind of works in the wine industry, be that design or making bottles or corks or something. It's so sort of steeped in wine culture, and it's just it's so interesting. It all makes sense because, as you say, that company being, as you said, based in Beaune for lifestyle reasons, then you may not have had the sort of day-to-day business contact or kind of wine contact, let's say, but all roads lead to wine, as you've sort of told with the connection with Becky, which is great. So you can't escape it.
You meet anyone here. I mean, it's like some places, if you live in a surfing community, everyone talks about the surf today, the waves. What are the waves like? Loic, my partner, is from the Alps, and everyone's talking about the snow conditions all the time. And that's how you have to be able to speak that language if you want to fit in and make some friends. And so here it's wine and weather, but with relation to wine.
Super interesting. As always, my head is sort of buzzing with lots of different places that I could potentially guide you and places that we could take the conversation. But actually one thread that really stood out to me, as we move into talking about cultural influences, I'd actually love to kind of transport you back really, or, out of Burgundy at least, and just really explore a little bit Kassel, which is your on your mother's side. That's where where your family comes from in Germany, and just the impact of the art fair there. And again, my instinct is that it will uncover some intangible elements, I think, of how you currently operate. Again, as well as exploring some of those longer term cultural influences.
Yeah, so my family on my mother's side is from Kassel, Germany, which is known for one thing only, really, that happens every 5 years. So it's an art fair, or it's really an exhibition. It's not so much a fair. That yeah, Kassel is a kind of quieter place for 5 years at a time, and then once every 5 years, it becomes the center of the art world, really, for 100 days. And people from all over the world come in to see exhibitions, and some of the world's, great artists have exhibited. Most, established artists, you can look back at their career, and at some point they've passed through Kassel. When it comes to contemporary art, it's really a reference point and very important. So my grandfather was part of Kassel, was part of Documenta 5. So I guess that's 1972. And every 5 years, so for my mother's life and for my life, we attended the Documenta, which is 100 days of exhibition. And what was really special about that is spending a summer in Kassel means that, most people come in and see the exhibition for 2-3 days. They go through everything. It takes a long time to see because it's spread out all over the city. But when you stay there for a whole summer, you really live with the artwork. So you might be, on your walk to the grocery store, and you'll pass by this incredible Giuseppe Pannone sculpture in the middle of the park, or an installation. There have also been really interesting things that have happened, like Ai Weiwei let lots of sheep throughout the city of Kassel at some point. So they're like performative art pieces, and the artists also install themselves many times in Kassel for a long period of time. And so the city really lives and breathes the exhibition for the 100 days. And yeah, so I spent quite a bit of time visiting each exhibition over the course of my life, every 5 years. And then it was my first job out of college. I worked at Documenta 12 and was part of the press relations team.
Yeah. And again, I know in our pre-talk, I really appreciated your perspective on the kind of longer-term impact that an event like that can have on a relatively small, and as you say, kind of relatively unknown city. Just the whole idea of maybe in the immediate aftermath of those 100 days, then everyone's like, oh, thank goodness we kind of can get back to normal, and then you sort of have a maybe not immediately reflecting on it, but there's that kind of 5-year cycle that kind of keeps repeating.
Exactly. So it's there's this cycle of 1 year after, maybe it's people sort of basking in the glory of the last exhibition, but also criticizing it a bit and saying it wasn't as good as the years before it. And there are always the haters of Documenta. They're the people who say that, that's not art. How can they call that art? And, because it is very conceptual and it always pushes the envelope. And yeah, so there's always that first kind of reaction, and then some people who are, the press is coming out, and there's a lot of lauding, but also criticizing. And then maybe for another year, some of the haters are actually changing and saying, well, actually, it was really, we made history. It was something very interesting, and we got to be a part of it, and that's great. And then for maybe 1 year, we're sort of not talking about Documenta as much. And then it starts up again with, okay, it's coming back in 2 years, only 2 years. We've just announced the creative director. We've announced, the managing partners and things like that. And so then it becomes relevant again and exciting. And then we ramp up, and then we criticize it again because we've heard that they're going to be putting things up that couldn't possibly be art. And yeah, there's a cycle that is, and then preparing the city again. It's like an Olympics, honestly. It's like, I would really relate it to how France was this last year with the Olympics, of people being really critical. This is going to be terrible. Like, we're all leaving Paris. Like, you can't hardly be bothered to be in France while the Olympics are on. And then people ended up actually really loving it, being very proud of it, feeling like it was very well run and couldn't have been smoother. And but then the ramping up and all of that, and kind of similar. It's real, like an art Olympics. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it's it's probably somewhere that most people just see for, as you say, those sort of three or 4 days every 5 years. But right. Obviously people live there, and kind of life goes on. And I think that's actually a parallel that I'd like to draw a little bit later on when we get into talking about some of the events that you're organising now, in Burgundy, and I guess the kind of that life cycle, which is potentially on an annual scale, cycle with something like wine and hip hop or Van hip hop, but I imagine that there's potentially some of the similar kind of feelings and ideas sort of coming through. So so again, moving forward a little bit really, and I think already sort of hinting at that in terms of your expertise really, and I think that you've really, I think it'll be a theme that will kind of come up, is kind of bringing two worlds together. I think maybe location, the US and France, and languages, and travel and wine. It definitely seems to be a sort of a continuing theme that sort of goes through. So I think really then almost before bringing them together, maybe to kind of split them apart really, and really I think focus on that the job that brought you to Burgundy and your experiences organising those special trips for donors. Just again, fairly high level, or maybe one or two examples. What were potentially some of the kind of common processes or steps that you think you personally relied on, or maybe the company itself relied on to make sure that those trips were a success and that the donors stayed happy?
Yeah, so we saw ourselves at this company as sort of an extension of the development team for a museum. So travel and something, my big takeaway from that job was that experiences, whether it's travel or events or what have you, are really great tools for encouraging giving, encouraging, loyalty, kind of being close to an institution, spending time together, doing really special things that one wouldn't be able to do if one wasn't part of this. There are a lot of private clubs that I see now that are popping up in the wine world. Museum donors and trustees it's similar, right? You may not be donating money to the wine club, but you're paying into something that you're now a part of, you're a member of, and you're on the sort of executive team almost, because you get to go and travel with the museum director, the curator. You get to do artist studio visits and discover artists that you may end up, collecting a work for yourself or for the institution. That was one of the most exciting things that I got to see happen. I did a trip, for instance, to Cambodia with the Cleveland Art Museum, and we visited an artist studio outside of Phnom Penh. And, we had such an incredible visit with him, and we got back in the bus at the end, and everyone was so giddy and excited from this wonderful encounter that, on the bus, it was basically decided we're going to buy a work. And so Hip Pitch was the artist, and we're going to buy a work for the museum. And so now in Cleveland, there's this huge installation by this Cambodian artist whose studio we visited in the countryside outside of Phnom Penh. So that kind of thing was really, really special. It encourages people to feel really involved, care also, really care about an institution, because people are, whether it's donors or people who are involved in a way, it's stewardship, right? For an institution, for a museum, for a certain cause even. We've also worked with some organizations, or now maybe in my current role, I'm working with organizations that support a certain cause. And so what I've learned was that these really special experiences, getting to go behind the scenes of a museum before it opens, getting to have dinner in a museum, getting to visit an artist studio, going to private collectors' homes, these kind of moments really connect you with, whoever you're traveling with, whether it's, the museum, the director, the curator, or, in some cases now working with private clubs or working with an auction house or any kind of institution or a wine advisor. I've kind of translated that. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's something that I've translated into what we're doing with our company, Hautes-Côtes, is, being able to encourage this kind of experiential connection that people end up having on these trips.
Yeah. And I think actually listening to you there, Milena, I've probably formulated the question that I perhaps should have asked at the start, or that I really wanted to know. And I guess it's really then, like that example of the Cambodian artist. Like, how do you get to the point where something like that is going to land, because I guess exactly as you said there, that kind of giddy feeling that I want, I love the guy or I love the gal, and I've made that connection, and this all just comes together. It feels from the outside a little bit like catching lightning in a bottle. So do you know what I mean? How do you actually move intentionally towards that, and how do you feel as though we're on the way to creating something that people are really gonna they're gonna enjoy, but it's gonna, again, in that example, it's gonna lead to something good for everyone involved?
Yeah. Well, I would say that it was all of these trips are collaborative projects. So, deciding which artists we're going to visit, for instance, is a real conversation that happens between curators, the director, myself, and people on the ground who are really in the know and who, are connected with within that world and can say, okay, so-and-so studio. And it's about talent. It's about, whose work you should really be seeing. But there's also an element that I'm always thinking about, which is like personality too. Because some artists, are incredibly talented, but they're not always really excited or willing to open their studios, and maybe they stand in front of their work and don't want to say anything because this isn't their comfort zone, which is fine. But I think for me, on the experience side, I love to bring together people who I know are going to hit it off in conversation. And the other side is true too. So as much as I'm interviewing, and I've got quotes up, interviewing or scoping out the artists, or now in what we're doing, maybe the winemakers, I'm also looking at who I'm bringing, right? So if I find that the group is, not so passionate or interested, they're not going to ask the right questions, they're not, really engaged, I won't bring them to see certain artists either. So it's really, all of this is a collaborative sort of, it's like matchmaking in a way, right? And making sure that it's going to be interesting for both parties, not asking favors, but rather, making sure that it's interesting for both sides. And then definitely, I've developed some expertise by looking and seeing lots and lots of art, just as I think one does with wine by tasting and drinking lots and lots of wine. But I definitely was not making all these decisions by myself, and I'm not any now either. It's really, these are conversations, because, art is very personal too, and as is wine. And, who are you excited about? Who do you want to see? And is there a connection with your collection that you already have, whether it's a museum or a collector? Looking at the puzzle, sort of.
No, really, really fascinating. And I just sort of reflect. I think we're getting, with any sort of big market and something like travel, I think, but you'll get different sort of tiers, and you'll have different focuses, and but I do sort of see that. And I think when you get into wine travel, which again I think we're gonna talk a lot more about later on, people are often investing their precious holiday. You don't get a lot of holidays in places like the States, do you? So it might be your main holiday for the year, and I think it's almost like there is a theme, there's a connection there, that people are traveling across from the US to Burgundy, or to another region maybe in Europe, or even further afield, say South Africa. They want to try to again kind of capture that experience, and I think it actually draws out the value, that somebody like yourself, that that sort of that curation, that matchmaking, as you say. I think all of that can help. It can be tempting to just do everything yourself and just sort of go off your own back. But I think you've sort of shown where there's maybe a little bit of local knowledge can kind of go a long way. And based on that, that's a perfect segue, really. On the expertise side, I'd really love to delve a bit more into your own wine education, which you've told me has been very much shaped by practical experiences, something I 100% relate to. So, some of the names that you mentioned on this side were Domaine du Jacques, Van Saison, and of course your partner Loic. So please again introduce us to, I guess, how you fell down that particular rabbit hole during your time in Burgundy.
So I guess, practical basically meaning drinking or being part of the harvest with friends, helping out, tasting, and being part of the community is as the extent of my wine education. I mean, I did do at some point the WSET level 2 just to get some also of some of the vocabulary, but I have to say, and it's not to criticize that program at all because I think it's probably really, really great for most people, but Burgundy is so much about the producer that, if one can talk about the appellation system and, your favorite parcels, it's interesting. It really is. But I think here, practically, people are on a first name basis when they're talking about domain. They're not even naming the domain here. They're naming the winemaker, and they're not even naming their last name always. So you have to really, it's all about the producer. And if someone says like, have you tasted Jean-Marc's? I really love Jean-Marc's wine. You have to know that they're talking about Jean-Marc Rouleau, who's in Meursault, and you have to kind of have a little bit of an idea. So, of course, that's something that's it doesn't speak so much to how much you know about wine, of course, but it is, I would say, where I started is just kind of knowing who these people are, I suppose, and the landscape in that way. And then tasting, just anytime there was a tasting, jumping in on it and helping then also with harvest. With friends, I have helped out for many years with Maison Harbor in Savigny-les-Beaune and helped them sorting grapes, and then Domaine Dandelion in the Hautes-Côtes de Beaune, which is our neighbors basically in the village over, helping out for a few days here and there with them. And being part of the experience also gives you a good understanding of the vintage, what are people talking about this year, and, just paying attention to the weather, honestly, being able to remember what it was like in 2012 when I moved here. That's what I'm always so impressed with Burgundians. You can say what was 97 like, and they can tell you, well, we started January was like this, and February was like this, and March was like this. They can really, and so if you pay attention to the weather, you're also developing some expertise because you can then talk to the vintage. And so then I would say I learned, by being around winemakers, helping out friends, tasting wines, and then practically at home, Loïc and I, when we purchased our house, we purchased it from Pierre-Henri Rougeau, who's a winemaker based in Meursault, but he was in Meloisé where we lived before, and he had sort of a garage winery and a nice cellar, and said, are you two interested in making wine? And we said, maybe in a few years at some point, perhaps. And he said, no, you have to do it now. I don't want to sell my house to someone who's going to park their cars in the garage. So if you're buying the house, you are making wine. And he very generously gave us some tips on people who we could potentially, experts and, customs information and the kind of practical things that we needed to start our winery. And so Loïc makes the wines called Vin Saison with a good friend, Tommy, our friend Tommy Pace. Before we started the project, it was with Eric Pignal, who's now the winemaker at Simon Bise. So he was before doing this as a side project, and when he started making the wines at Bise, he went full-time at Bise and didn't need to do a side project in addition to that because he's making the wines that he loves to make. But yeah, I guess, I get in the barrels and help out with that whole process. I would not call myself a winemaking expert by any means, but definitely part of all of that. And then during the pandemic, when my travel job stopped because it was obviously all of travel came to a screeching halt, I started working for Domaine Dujac in Moray-Saint-Denis, which was a really wonderful place to land. I don't think I could have known at the moment how incredibly wonderful and impactful it would be to work with the Cess family. I was doing sort of special projects with Jeremy and with Diana and Alec, mostly with Jeremy, and have continued to work with Jeremy since leaving Dujac, also with our other project, Vin Hip-hop. But it was such a great place to be. I mean, an incredible domaine. You can't get much better when it comes to wines of the Côte de Nuit. And so learning by tasting, learning by getting to know the parcels, driving around, seeing the parcels, hosting a few tastings from time to time, and by tasting as well. Some very lucky days there.
Yeah, no, I just love it, and I think that the thing that just always jumps off when, I talk to people like yourself who are, again, like myself, very much self-directed. I think, it's easy to sort of say, oh, I just drink or I just do this. But, what you've described there is for me, it's an absolutely, deep understanding, cultural understanding, cultural awareness. Even they're talking about, people are talking about the vintages. And, I've written down something here, specific knowledge. It's something that a term that I'm familiar with, which is it's knowledge that you've got and kind of you've assimilated, and of course the people around you will have, but a lot of it is stuff that can't be learnt. It almost has to be lived, and that you've actually you've got that sort of top to bottom really.
And then like surrounding yourself with experts, because I don't call myself one, but being around now, I've had several opportunities to listen to Paul Wasserman give an introduction to Burgundy to clients of ours, but also drinking wine with him as a friend. So he's another mentor when it comes to talking about wines. I think just listening to people. Brenna Quigley is someone that we have collaborated with on several projects. I mean, that's given a whole new dimension. What an opportunity to walk through the vineyards with her and be thinking about geology and learning. I mean, this is high level stuff. I haven't gotten as geeky as I would like to. I need to spend much more time with her. But understanding and tasting in a very different way when you're sitting with someone like Brenna. And it's so different with everyone. I mean, Chiza Bees, I've done some incredible tastings with, and her philosophies, the way she talks about wine is also, she's another, just fascinating person to listen to. I think listening is really important, listening. I wouldn't say it's just drinking, although I would say that it started like that. That was the advice I got when I arrived here, was rather than pick up some books, it was, open some bottles.
Yeah.
But, and I always say that to my family. My family is really not wine orientated at all. And if they ask me, how can you really know the difference between this and that? It's like, drink a lot of apple juice or eat a lot of chocolate, anything, and at a certain point, you're going to say, I really love this like incredible apple juice. And this is like, I won't drink the Minute Maid stuff anymore because it's just so good, this other stuff. And, I think with any product that you just get, like, and same with art, like look at a lot of art and you'll start to know what you like. I think it's just about lots and lots of exposure. And then we also go through phases. I mean, I've also seen my palate change and my interests change. And that's the same when it comes to food with, taste. It can change over time. You can be into a really, really excited about a certain type of cuisine. And the same happens to me with wine. Although I haven't really strayed from Burgundy since I moved here, which, I do love other regions. I think I mentioned to you, there's a bromance, although I need to find the girl word for that, with Piedmont, between Burgundy and Piedmont. There's some love affair happening, and, the Piedmontese winemakers come here and taste, and everyone's so happy to receive them, and vice versa. I'm heading there in about a week with friends. We have an annual trip to Piedmont and taste a lot of Nebbiolo that, I really love going to that region. And so, I definitely am interested in other regions, but it also depends on my exposure. I haven't been really exposed to wines from New Zealand, for instance. And so, I can't say that I have much knowledge there at all.
Sure. And again, I think something that's coming up in me, listening to you talk, Milena, is just winemaking communities, and actually just winemakers. I think that's absolutely something that I have loved and continue to love, is just, being able to go and, like, as an example that I did, go and spend a week in Oregon, like me alone, renting a car, microphone in hand, which for me personally, that's a hugely important part of it, because it's okay. We've got, a little bit of a schedule, it's okay. We've got a 2-hour recording window, but we get to taste, and you can't, and I couldn't help but be, massively affected by the community and the warmth, really, I think that the winemakers have. And, it's so special, that link to the agricultural product, but at the same time, that skill and that dedication to then making another product off the back of that can then can be stored, and it's effectively is preserving and is preserved, and then can again go out and enthrall and draw in a whole other new community of people all around the world who, again, maybe never get to travel to Burgundy or to those wine regions they're drinking the wines from. But isn't that just an amazing, kind of cycle that we can, we're able to send those products out there into the world to kind of tell those stories and affect those people as well. So I'm a big fan of what you're talking about here. So, and really, in kind of, I guess, in closing a little bit on your story and kind of, how you kind of, kind of showing up. I think, something that is always interesting is actually to talk a bit about the challenges. It's, I guess it's not always rosy. And I think also the challenges are things that we kind of draw on as we go forward as well. And one of the things that you mentioned to me was that idea of sort of, new places, new people, new situations, kind of everything changing at once, kind of potentially being challenging. And I know that this was, potentially related to kind of not knowing anyone there, not speaking French, and kind of taking the time to assimilate culturally. So I wonder if you just, reflect on that kind of part of the journey. And again, bring us up to date as to, I think it continues to influence your business and how you operate going forward as well.
Yeah, so it was not easy at the beginning. I mean, I did think I landed in Disneyland and I was, over the moon when I first arrived and, saw how charming Beaune was. So it did feel dreamy at first, but then very quickly I started dreading the weekends and dreading any time away from work where, I knew my colleagues and spoke English. The weekends when everyone goes home to their families or does things, kind of amongst themselves. And it was more difficult to, I didn't know anyone. So even the few people that I did know, they, they went home probably to their families on the weekend. So the language was difficult, meeting people was difficult, but it, was also, I guess, persistence and going out and going to the bar du square before it was the bar, the local bar, which is now turned into a restaurant to everyone in Burgundy's dismay. When Romain Escoffier had children and a family, he changed his bar, which was like the central meeting point of Beaune. He made it into a restaurant, which is a great restaurant, but it was a kind of place to go and sit at the bar and try to practice French and with the help of some liquid courage. I think that was an initial challenge. And then maybe fast forwarding some years when I did, when that job did end, a very big challenge of having the rug pulled out from underneath me. I had a 5-month-old at the time, and obviously the pandemic was extremely difficult for everyone and shocking. But when your job relies on travel, maybe it felt like it would never come back. And so that was, sort of who am I here in Burgundy if I'm not working in this for that company in this niche and in the art world? So do I give up the art side and just pivot completely to wine, which is what I thought I would do. And when I went to go work at Dujac and was very, very happy there, but did find myself missing the art side. So I started my master's program online with Sotheby's in art business, hoping that I could develop something there that I could do both wine and art, but separate, because I really had not yet had the clicking moment of bringing these two worlds together. So maybe that's another challenge too, that I was really pushing back on any kind of, when people said, oh, that's so interesting, you have, art and wine, why don't you combine them? I was like, no, I don't see it. I think it's cheesy, and I didn't like it because I thought that if I spoke about my art world when I was in the wine world, that it took away from any kind of expertise or just the interest of people here. I thought maybe they wouldn't be interested. I don't know. It was naive looking back. And then vice versa, when I was in the art world, if you're not in London or New York or Paris, you're not interesting. Maybe I thought from an art world perspective, I'm like a country bumpkin out here in Burgundy. So I kind of kept that on the low down. And it was when I met Jermaine Stone, I think was, a big mentor for me there, someone who has very much embraced the two worlds that he loves, hip hop and wine. And he was like, go for it. You have to embrace both. And absolutely, they can come together, and you're going to find unique ways of bringing them together. It's not just about, two things that you love, but there are bridges, and you'll find them. And that was, I think a challenge something that I was uncomfortable with at first, because I had seen art and wine projects done, and it just felt a little bit too surface level for me. It felt very commercial, drinking wine and looking at art. It's just because they're two, maybe luxury products for me. I don't like to see them that way. And so it didn't feel natural for me. So it was sort of a challenge to overcome, I guess. Why didn't I feel comfortable bringing the two of them together? And then now I'm absolutely comfortable there, and have found that there is an overlap. It may not be a huge one, that's as obvious as, food and wine, for instance, but it is a really interesting one when you find the people who love both, or when you introduce people from the other side who maybe weren't exposed to, art as a winemaker, or an artist wasn't exposed to art, to wine. So finding that and getting more comfortable there.
Yeah, it's so important. Big shout out to Jermaine as well, because I think again, who would have thought that wine and hip hop go so well as they do together? And the more you look down that rabbit hole, and you start to see the people who collect wine, and the people who talk musically and sing about wine and rap about wine, and but then have I guess collecting. I always remember again from the US, like Gary Vaynerchuk. He always used to talk about, as soon as he realized that people were doing the same thing with wine as they were doing with baseball cards, he's like, yeah, I get it now. And then he could bring kind of those two worlds together, the collecting and the wine, and there's always a way to, I think, maybe express more fully who we are as well, and that's absolutely my journey as well. I'm from a psychology background, and a business psychology background, so it's always around, and has been around, the people in business and making things better for the people there, and sort of turning my attention to wine and talking about things like storytelling, and even what's coming up more and more now about things like wine tastings, and how do we make those better for the people? I think it's again bringing different mindset from one side, be it art, be it hip hop, be it psychology, and then bringing it across to something like wine. All three of us are going to see completely different opportunities. They're all going to be very personal to ourselves, and they'll maybe resonate with a different set of people. And guess what? That's totally amazing, isn't it? And that's totally fine,
as long as it's authentic.
Yeah.
To you, right. Like, with Jermaine, that's what he was really telling me is, it's not cheesy if it's authentic to you, and if it's not just about putting, some beautiful work of art with a beautiful wine together. As long as there are layers and it's something interesting, and if you can talk about it because you're interested in it, then people might want to hear it. So, whereas Jermaine, he's not just having you drink wine and listen to hip hop because they're two cool things, but he's drawing these really interesting parallels that are, profound and thoughtful, and open your mind to think about wine and music in different ways. I think it's really beautiful what he does, and I'm definitely influenced by it when I'm thinking about bridging the worlds of wine and art. Absolutely,
and as always happens, when an interview is going well, an absolutely perfect segue really into the next section, where we're talking, a bit more around your kind of service, if you like, and what you do, and I think you've kind of helpfully in our pre-talk really, spoken about travel, events, wine. Talk us through, I guess, how do these things really kind of come together? And I think also what would be helpful, and was helpful for me, was considering really, kind of what are potentially some of the problems that you're solving through your services, and also the opportunities that you're kind of capitalizing on as well.
Sure. So we started our company called Hautes-Côtes. So Loïc, coming from like a purely wine background, he was working at Domaine de Monty and had done a sommelier formation, education, and background, but he didn't ever work in restaurants. But and then winemaking, of course, with our project Vin Saison. And myself on the art side, when we did decide, let's bring these two together, we were, and maybe more with an emphasis on the wine and being here in Burgundy and being able to offer trips. So educational trips for small groups. Everything we do is bespoke. We don't have a Burgundy tour. Everything is a collaboration. So whether it's, with Brenna Quigley, we did this great roadside terroir trip in which we came up with a program that really resembles Brenna and the types of wineries that are interesting for her. Maybe people who listen to Brenna's podcast are already interested in these wineries and these concepts that she's developing on. So then we built a program that we thought really, was a roadside terroir trip. And then we're working with, private groups as well, like a sommelier or a wine club with their private client group or their members group. It could be a restaurateur coming, and they know the landscape already, but we might know a different element to it. And we also just take care of everything from A to Z. So all logistics and the access to the wineries. Burgundy's doors are much heavier than the doors of other regions. So it's, a bit difficult to get into some of these estates. And that's something that that's a niche that we are quite strong in, is getting this kind of access. Also being able to introduce all of the players, whether they're the, very well-known names, but also the up-and-coming, the new wave, young producers, the next generation as well, really interesting. And so putting together a program that, really speaks to the group that we're showing around. It could be also just a private group of friends. But we really like this element of having, one person or one entity, sort of like similar to what I did with museums, where there's this one, institution or organization or club that everyone's a part of, because then they're already connected in some way, just for the chemistry on the trip. If they're not already a friends group, that's really, really nice. And so organizing trips, so Burgundy, primarily, I would say 80% Burgundy. And then also the Jura, we do quite a bit, and a little bit Rhône, Champagne, Provence, and maybe a little bit Bordeaux. We've had like a few trips that we've done around Bordeaux and going all the way over to Spanish Basque Country and French Basque Country. And yeah, that's a region that we're really actually developing quite a bit in right now, because we've had a lot of interest and we love it over there too. And so that's how we started. And this events element came up. It wasn't part of our initial plan, but we've left our company open enough that we can shape shift a bit. And so the first one was Wine and Hip Hop, was Jermaine coming to us and saying, hey guys, let's put together something at the end of the harvest. He was actually talking about Provence initially and a dinner, and we changed the concept to Burgundy because it was just like a crazy period for us to go anywhere else. And we said, let's just do it in Burgundy. Let's do an after harvest celebration. And why don't we, instead of doing a dinner, why don't we make it more of a party, a tasting, and then why don't we also serve some street food that kind of resembles the podcast that you did with grilled cheese sandwiches and incredible white Burgundy. So we did that our first year, and then now we've done 3 years together with Jermaine and with Jeremy Cess of Domaine du Jacques. And so that's something that's grown, and we didn't necessarily set out to do it, but bespoke events, I suppose, is the other element of the company that's been growing. So Terra is an art exhibition that we put together, and that was an initiative that I guess I had been dreaming of, bringing art to Burgundy rather than just doing things in art away from Burgundy and being based here, but also bringing the works of art here. And so it's an exhibition that takes place for 1 month and across private spaces, which is really great because we don't always get to go into these spaces, and we bring back to life. We've been able to, exhibit art in a theater in the center of Beaune that no one saw for 150 years. And another chateau that we included this year that, hardly anyone has had the chance to visit. So anyway, so these elements are, the Terra comes internally. It's an internal initiative, but Vin Hip Hop was a sort of a mix, a collaborative project. And we're also getting requests to do, a pop-up dinner here, a small event, a private event also for, someone's 50th birthday in the vineyards with music and food and that kind of thing. And, it wasn't what we initially set out to do, but we found we really, really enjoyed doing it. And we have some people on our team who are really events focused. And so we're growing that part as well.
Yeah, it's so incredible, really. And I'm sort of writing down lots of different ideas here. But I think that, if I had to, for me, the one word I would grab out of all of that is actually authenticity. Because it just feels, again, I love how the conversation has developed. But, I could, if I wanted to, kind of, I think draw threads back from everything you've just said there, back to Kassel, back to that whole experience and that influence in your life. I thought it was also just super interesting that, again, that idea of collaboration, mentorship as well. Like as you said, Jermaine had the idea of doing something Provençal, and which I'm sure would have been an absolutely fantastic event. But it just sounds as though collaborating, bouncing ideas off one another, you've created something that's so much more, I think. And I've even I've got friends who have attended. I think attended the last event. I actually, as part of this series, I interviewed Amber Gardner, who I know was there on site as well, and just all of these different perspectives on the event. With speaking specifically about Vanna Hip Hop, with this sort of bigger backdrop, really, of people are drinking less wine, and are we losing people in rural communities? It just feels as though it's such an amazing expression, first of just who Jermaine and who the people around him authentically is, but that actually then it's bringing in similarly minded people, and then it's actually kind of solving those bigger problems, but in a much more interesting way than sort of just browbeating or another report saying how 100%. Things are reducing. Yeah.
We talked about this actually afterwards, that, the event, we did it because we're friends, Jeremy, myself, Loic, Jermaine, we all wanted to do something together, and we all, loved the idea of bringing hip hop to a really historic place too, the Claude Vougeot, which has not traditionally done this kind of thing at all. And now, we have our calendar spot set for us for the coming years. They're really excited about the event themselves as well. But we did not set out to make wine cool for young people, or the element of diversity too is something that's important to all of us, but it wasn't what we were. So in that sense, it can feel contrived when there are events or initiatives to make wine young and cool or diverse. It doesn't know, and this felt so natural. I mean, when you look at the pictures, I just love to see the mix of ages, races, different people from different backgrounds. Like what's so special about this event is also having owners of the wineries and the people who work in the wineries, and people from big cities and people from here locally, and just this mix of people that has come together naturally. There are so many positive effects of the event that we didn't, that weren't part of our initial plan, and that have, bringing people together, providing some opportunities, also connecting people who are maybe part of, who are doing their studies or finishing an internship or coming over to France for this event, and then they ended up meeting someone, and now they're going to do, work somewhere. I don't know. There have been some really nice stories coming out of it too.
I'm sure. And then really, as we kind of, look towards closing, I really, it's kind of easy question to kind of close with. But as we I think start to explore ideas around, longer term purpose and, the lasting impact really, of things like those events and like your company kind of leave behind. I think I'd maybe, as a starting point, just encourage you to talk about some of the impacts that you've been able to make in the local community as a kind of direct result of being there, which I think again is, for me, is helping to strengthen those bonds between yourself and the local community.
because we live here and this is our community, we don't want to be asking favors. There is this sort of extractive tourism, or we ask a lot. As Loic and I both worked in wineries, we saw how much winemakers are. We ask quite a lot of them, and people come for tastings, and the Burgundians don't really charge for tastings. It's very different from in other regions where you just you pay your price and it's a commercial transaction, and there's a hospitality team. Here there's no hospitality teams really. I mean, it does exist, but not so much in these wineries that we're, hoping to visit with. And so we are conscious that, this is our business and we don't want to be basing our business on favors. And so we're really pleased with this other element of events that, offer something for our local community. And if we were just this sort of UFO effect and coming and doing something here, or if we were just extracting, thank you so much for your wine and your visit and your time and this and that, and it wouldn't feel good. And it's really important for us so we build in donations to really interesting projects that we want to support and that our groups also want to support. I mean, no one who's coming to visit here wants to just take and leave, and they want to pay someone for their time, which whether someone accepts it or not, they might be also open to us supporting some kind of a project, or at least seeing that this group is invested in doing something beneficial around here. So there's that element, but then there's also, these two for now events that are, Terra is free to visit, and, it's an exhibition that lasts 1 month, and you can have tours of these incredible spaces, get to interact with artists and see wonderful art that's been brought here. And to be able to do that as a free exhibition is really special. And then Hip-hop, we're limited on space, so we can't have everyone, unfortunately, but to keep the prices also accessible and, not to become an inflated kind of exclusive. I mean, we like it to be, I don't like the word exclusive so much, which is used a lot in events and planning and trips and things like that. But, obviously, without the space issue, we would have everyone come, and we are looking for a bigger space to do something else larger. But anyway, I think this kind of exchange that we can provide with our community, where we're asking people to be a part of this, we're asking them to attend and be, we're inviting them to take part, and then also to there's a mutual exchange and conversation, which feels healthier and nicer for us as people who live here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you've made the point so clearly, and it was just from my view everything was just around kind of almost like leaving the place better than kind of when you found it, but that's I guess even more so, and even more of a driver when you're living there. It's like, okay, I want to find it continually, and putting that as a longer term goal as well. And I just imagine that those things will just continue to compound over time. It's like kind of, okay, we just make things a little bit better, and we support one or two initiatives, then I think that the ripples and the positivity from that will I'm sure grow and again compound over time.
When people visit a place, they start caring about it, and when they have good experiences in a place that actually get them, into nature, walking through the vineyards, seeing the impact of the forests and the agroforestry that affects the winemaking, the wine growing. It's really important, and you see that people care. And then when they have this, that's why experiences, I think, are super important, because you go, you see, and then you start to maybe nurture something.
Amazing. So it's been so great, and the hour has completely flown by. So really, in closing, I'm sure the listeners would like me to ask you, what is potentially the next step that they can take if they're interested in learning more or getting involved, or helping your mission and what you guys are up to over there.
So as I said, everything we do is bespoke. So we don't have at this time sort of open trips that we're advertising that you can just sign up for. But if you did have a group or you were part of an organization, contact us. We would be happy to put together an experience, whether it's an event or a trip, an educational trip, or that's something that one can do. And one can also sign up for our newsletter, because at some point there will be some more open events happening that are, whether it's Hip-hop 3.0, 4.0, or the next edition of Terra, or some other wine and art dinners, and maybe vin et book dinners that are popping up in 2025. So we have a newsletter, and we'll be sharing that information.
Okay. And then, just let me know remind me, please, what's the best email and the website, really.
Yes,
if you want to go
let's say the hautescotes.com, so HAUTESCOTES.com, and in email address info@hautescotes.com.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Milena Berman, co-founder of Hautes-Côtes. Do visit hautescotes.com, the link is below, where you can learn more and find their main social media handles. And why not reach out to Milena to let her know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions that it might have raised. Next time on Interpreting Wine Mosaic of Wine Series 1 in episode 574, I'll be speaking with Barbara Drew, Master of Wine. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to be alerted when that episode goes live. See you then.